All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to More in Common, Conversations for a Common Life. We decided that it was a good opportunity for us to continue the conversation after our first gathering in our diocesan formation series for our common life with Stephanie Spellers. We were so excited to be able to do that. And we thought, hey, let's continue the conversation. So I'm here with Dennis Reed, Reverend Dennis Reed. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute, and also Bishop Kevin Nichols. Dennis, go ahead, tell us who you are before, let me tell people who I am in case they don't know. I am Sandy Willian. I'm part of the bishop's staff. I'm the Canon for Racial Reconciliation and Community Engagement. Dennis?
Thanks, Sandy. I'm Dennis Reed. I'm the consulting missioner for convocations here in Diobeth. And part of the fun thing of this series, and especially our first event, was to sort of kick off a formation and advocacy opportunity that also gave us an opportunity to meet in convocation and talk with folks in our closer to our local contexts about this work. So that's my involvement here.
Yes. Bishop, tell us who you are.
Who am I? Today, I am the 9th Bishop of Bethlehem, I think. In my 3rd year, I think this is my 4th Christmas at the cathedral, which is always a blessing here in the Christmas city. And it's just a joy to be with the two of you and with those who are joining us this night. Advent blessings.
Thank you. So, this just came to my head. Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit in like a minute, the idea of For a Common Life series for those people that don't know what it is, sure. And then we can begin talking about our first impressions.
Sure. So the long and the short of it is 2 different parts or groups in our diocese kind of had the same idea at the same time independently. And so that was some folks from our Racial Justice and Reconciliation Task Force had been wanting to offer some sort of series or class or opportunity to engage books like Stephanie Spellers, A Church Cracked Open, and other works and that kind of thing. And then on the convocation side of things, we wanted to be able to come together over a topic that was important to us, that was important to the church and important to this diocese as one of our 5 priorities to engage both racial justice and advocacy for the most vulnerable. So when those 2 groups came together, this is what we started to build. So we're delighted to have done one series already, or one session already, with 3 more to go.
That's right. We were so excited. We were super happy that it came out super well, I think, our first gathering. So with that, I'm going to start with you, Bishop Kevin, because sure. Why not? Can you tell us a little bit about your impressions? How they go for you, that first gathering of this new formation series?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Stephanie Spellers has always been a bit of a hero to me. She is also good friends with Kelly Brown Douglas, who is another wise scribe who I just continue to learn from each day. And the way in which she articulates the realities of where we are as a church in this moment, what we've endured through this pandemic, the cracking open on so many different levels, she just brings that to light. And the word reckoning was just kind of what struck me. I've been sitting with that word and went to the definition to see exactly what it means. And I want to start by talking a second about reckoning, because for me, when you get to the reality of what we're dealing with in this moment, that word kind of I think crystallizes this calling, an account, or in biblical sense, it was God's judgment of sorts. It was a reckoning. It was calculating the cost or the impact of something, and the reckoning of this moment, from a racial justice perspective and just from a vulnerability standpoint, just continues to speak to my heart. There can't be reconciliation without reckoning, she told us. And for me, it seems everywhere I walk, we are in need of some sort of reconciling love, a deepening of our relationships. And it's got to begin with that reckoning, that truth telling.
Yeah, I like how she also, in that section, she talked about the energy that comes with the reckoning, right? That sort of fire that needs to happen for us to be able to get to that reconciliation. We can't just be seated all the time and waiting for something to happen. We need to be motivated. We need to be in action so that that reconciliation, that true reckoning can happen. I really like that, especially for me as a person that likes to be active and like that image of energy and fire. I really resonated with me a lot. I like that very much. Any thoughts on that, Dennis, or any other impressions on your end?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I like both of those thoughts, both the idea of the importance of reckoning, and Bishop, my mind went to the very biblical idea that one day we will all make an account before God of the things that we have done and known and I think been a part of. And that's both sort of an active and a passive thing. Like, what are the things that I have benefited from in my life, for example, and how has that affected what ministry looks like or what church looks like or whatever. But and yeah, Sandy, the idea of that sort of energy and the experience of that, and how so many different perspectives and experiences in our church are different, and yet we've often come to them as if it's sort of a monolithic thing, that there's only one way that the Episcopal Church is the Episcopal Church, and we know that not to be true. And that was one of my favorite parts of what Canon Spellers had to say, was just not only offering her personal story, but also a pretty important look at our history to say, here are the places where privilege has shown up over and over again. Here are the places where whiteness is pervasive. And how do we talk about that in a way that is both truthful and still maybe sensitive to folks who have only just heard this for the first time and maybe aren't ready for the reckoning yet, Bishop. But so that's kind of where my mind went initially. Those were my sort of gut thoughts, but I'm with you both about both of those things.
Yeah, and Dennis, I think, I forget the exact words, but she said something about folk of privilege have to be about self-emptying. There's a need to release. And, I am just so aware of my own privilege, my own kind of entitled living, and realize that there needs to be a deeper awareness by me of my own entitlement. And the way that kind of has seemed to unfold in my life is, it's been through listening to others and experiencing firsthand, from those whom I love, the stories of folk who have just not been invited to the table in the same way that I'm always invited, and really having to come to terms with that. My oldest son, Graham, reminded me of an online thing about Kevin and Jamal. If anybody hasn't seen it, I've mentioned this a few times to folks, go online and just type in Kevin and Jamal, because it's my story. Obviously, I'm Kevin. It's two kids, same age, same community, different schools, different opportunities, and privilege that comes from that. And my own personal bias, my own sense of just kind of who I am when I enter a room, is really something that I need to release in my life and learn more about. So I love the way she presented that opportunity to us without pushing too hard, but it was sure indicting to me.
Yeah. A sneak peek of another of our presenters, guest speakers, said that talked a little bit about that self-emptying and that letting go. But she said, when you let go, you usually stretch your hands out and you're also receiving something. It's not like you're letting go of everything that you have and you're left with nothing. You're also if we're open, right, to receive whatever that is, it's sometimes not going to be what we want, but it may be what we need. I like that image of I'm maybe letting go of something, and I should be letting go of something so that others can have that, but I will be receiving something in return. That concept of kenosis, of that word that she used, of self-emptying, really, it's a great concept. And I mean, we look at how Jesus gave something for us, right? And what we're receiving from that, and the beauties that brings. I think we always think about giving up something as a negative, and we shouldn't. That video of Kevin and Jamal, right? If Kevin giving something up, that means Jamal can have something else, and then together they can create something beautiful. But we have to be aware that we should be doing that more often than not. Aware that people like Jamal, people like my community, we need more Kevins, more other people that look like us, to give something, to self-empty, and then they'll receive something in return. I like that a lot.
Don't you think there's a lot of apprehension around that idea? I mean, kenosis is one of those sort of fancy church words, right? But the idea of self-giving is a fearful one, is one that is very tempting to avoid, because I think especially in some of the sort of societal conversations that tend to happen around either race or identity or whatever, the prevailing thought is, if I give something up, I lose. Right? Like I'm handing over my power. I'm weakening myself, and those are not things that we often like identifying with. But then we in the church can sort of turn that right on its head and say, yeah, and that's also the way Jesus calls us to go. Like, there was Bishop. I'm thinking of, I think you alluded to it earlier, but like the idea of, for the privileged, the way of following Jesus is letting go. The way of the cross is the way of following Jesus for the privileged and for everybody, but especially for those who have. We need to learn a different way. We need to know that self-emptying, right, Sandy? Like the idea of that it's we don't embrace a strong Jesus. We embrace a Jesus who went to the cross and emptied everything for the sake of love. And if we can't do that, how do we start it? Like, how do we have that conversation one step at a time,
Yeah. For both of you that are not of dark skinned, what can that look like? What might that look like, that self-emptying? Can you think of anything? Am I putting you in your spot? Answer that question. What does self-emptying, what does giving up my privilege, what is one thing that can look like?
Yeah, I think, Sandy, when I first came to the diocese, I talked a lot about giving over authority. It was a wonderful sermon by Bishop Susan Goff in my earliest days of ministry, where she talked about that ultimately that's what Jesus did at every turn, was he gave over authority, whatever authority or privilege he had. And when I heard that, it just reminded me that because I am of privilege, because I have authority, because of the positions that I hold, the status, because of the color of my skin, that I ultimately have to be inviting at every turn. So my need is to say, who's not invited in this moment? Who's not able to come to the table at this moment? Who's impacted by my decisions, which many of them just seem so insignificant, and then huge decisions. How does that impact the most vulnerable in our community, and especially people of color? And if that's not at the forefront of our awareness, then I think we just continue on thinking that, everyone's just like I am. Everyone has the same opportunity, the same privilege. But see, I learned that, 20 something years ago, when our youngest son came into my life, and I, at so many turns, I realized that he just didn't have the same opportunity that I had. He was looked at different. at every turn. And the way I usually knew it was I'd be standing there, and because I'm white and he's not white, they wouldn't think that I was his dad. They would say amazing things to my son with me standing there. And then I'd have to say, whoa, whoa. And that's where I kind of learned somewhere along the way of just how privileged I am. And it breaks my heart, quite frankly.
You talk about having that kind of experience over time, and like you said, 20 something years ago is when a lot of this was something you encountered and knew. That was my first reaction, Sandy, to your question was I need to know enough about myself to know what that privilege has looked like and being able to speak truthfully about it. So the example from Stephanie Spellers was her talking about her affluent friends of privilege and NPR and cello lessons. And that was one of those things, like I could feel my chest get tight. I was like, oh, that was me. That was totally me growing up, except it was band instead of cello and it was whatever. But and enough to say, all right, if my first instinct to that is to be defensive, that probably means there's two things happening. I'm a little angry and I'm a little afraid. And so what are those? Why are those sort of popping up in my experience and my memory? And then what do I do about it? So privilege can be a funny thing to confront in oneself. So I think that's the first thing for me. The second thing is learning, but also making that my own responsibility. Because if a colleague of ours in this series has talked about, white people have to do this for themselves. Like we can't just wait for Black and brown people to tell us the answer. That's not going to work. Yeah. So if that means I need to read authors and listen to sermons and or take courses from people I normally wouldn't, that's pretty telling as well. But then all of that, as we've said in our planning for this series and our hope for our churches and our people, is it can't stop there. It has to move into some sort of action or solidarity or who knows what. But that's kind of those are the thoughts that I've had since we've started this, is to say, what does it look like in my own life? And how do I know myself both generously, but also truthfully about what that privilege means and how I can let go of some of it for the sake of others.
Yeah. Yeah. And and thank you for that, both of you. And we have to also remember, this is not a one-time thing. This is a process that has to happen maybe forever, right? All the years that we're alive in this earth. It's not something that today I listen to this, like people listening to us and I understand it all. I mean, it's not that. And we have to be give ourselves some grace, give other people grace as well. This is a journey that requires a lot of, I think, discernment, but also patience. And I know a lot of times those feelings of fear and anger are the first ones we hold on to because it's foreign, because it's different. This topic of privilege, of race, and the history of our church, our families, our cultures are not easy to digest sometimes. But it's not easy for white people. It's also not easy for Black people, because for a lot of us, we're reliving trauma generations after generations that still affect our day to day. So that part where you say, Dennis, that we can white people or Anglos can expect Black and brown folks to teach them, it's true. Sometimes we just can't because there's no way to do that in a way that is healthy for us. So getting out of people's comfort zones for Anglo people to do that, to do the work on themselves, it's helpful not only to them but to us.
Well, that's something we talked about, though, like in terms of, okay, it can be very easy to sort of turn anything like this into a conversation of like, oh, how tragic for those white people. It's like, well, no, like this is not an easy conversation for anybody. And yet I think that really gets overlooked sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've had a couple of us were invited on a panel, and somebody asked this question as well, like, why do we need to continue to talk about this? Why is this important? Well, or, or why can't we just get over it? Something like that in relation to how difficult this conversation is. And it's not an easy conversation for anybody. That's why I always say we have to give each other grace, but also be able to be open to it. Don't let those first reactions be the ones that guide that conversation, that stop a relationship. I always say justice or reconciliation is relationship. Justice is relationship. And even the people that you like the most, even, I love my siblings, but sometimes I don't want to talk to them. Those relationships are are difficult, but I love them. So if loving my neighbor means that I'm going to have hard conversations, then that's what I need to do. And putting God in the middle, putting Jesus in the middle of that interaction. Yeah. What comes up for you, Bishop Kevin? Or should I ask one of the questions that our friends online have?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So Susan Keller, hi Susan, asks, how can we make people of color to feel safe and welcome in the church? How can we make people of color feel welcome in the church?
Yeah. You ever just walk into a church? I mean, you ever just kind of like, forget about your church. You ever just go into another church, whether you're out of town, on vacation, whatever, you just go in there and you walk in there and you have that immediate sense of whether or not this is a place that feels comfortable or one that you can connect with. And one of the challenges in a number of our communities, but it's really shifting. In a number of our communities, as you walk in and everyone looks like me. I mean, everyone in our communities is white. So it's hard. It's hard to welcome someone. It's hard for someone to feel, I think, like this is home for them. But we've got so much to learn from our communities here in the diocese, I believe, where there is diversity, and there are really powerful ways in which communities have learned from each other's stories and living together and being in leadership together. And I personally think that it's the members of those diverse communities that need to tell us more about what it feels like when they walk into a church, into one of our churches. And instead of getting defensive about it, just saying, oh, that's not true or that's not fair, just say, all right, how do we shift that? What do we need to do? So again, I feel like it's the self-emptying. It's like, don't be defensive. Don't just like, what did it feel like to be here? And what more do we have to do to make you feel at home? Nobody wants to touch the liturgy. I get it. You can't touch the liturgy. Well, you know what? I think Stephanie did a nice job with that. We got to touch our liturgy, quite frankly, if we want to invite people that are not just like me. So you got to be open to what that's going to mean if you truly want to invite a diverse community.
Yeah.
I think Susan's question is a good one. I think the implied answer is they're not. Like, our churches aren't. Sometimes we're incredible at welcome. Sometimes we're not. And I think to name that, no matter what the Episcopal Church's signs on our roads say, is a step in the right direction to say, okay, as we talked about in session one, we are an overwhelmingly white church, far more so than the actual demographics of our communities. And that isn't necessarily a failure to know those communities, but it is probably more or less a failure to interact and build those relationships, Sandy, that you're talking about. And what does justice look like? It looks like a relationship. Great. Have we lived that? So this doesn't have a fast answer. It doesn't have a quick solution, but it does have a way that I think the Spirit guides the church to say, look, the answer to this is somewhat obvious. How well do we know each other? How well have we embraced people who do not look like the average Episcopalian, like Bishop Kevin is saying? And the worship thing's interesting, though. I kind of hope we get there, because that also came up in one of the questions of our small groups about okay, are we comfortable with the idea of our worship maybe having some embedded whiteness in it? And like, oh, do we want to talk about that? Do we want to, God forbid we forsake the prayer book or parts of it. But yeah, that's another interesting conversation we might have too.
And Dennis, yeah, I want to hear what Sandy has to say. I just want to add one point. The other side of this is, we are so good at waiting for people to come to our door, but the flip of that is, where do we need to be going where people are, and what is it that we need to bring with us to reach out to those folk, whoever it may be. Sandy, you're doing wonderful work with that in the Latinx community at the cathedral. Tell us more about that and what that's been like.
Yeah, well, honestly, planting a community is not easy, right? First of all, I come from a family of priests, and I never knew that this was going to be part of my journey, but I'm grateful for it, because it's showing me what it means to truly be a follower of Jesus, right? And the complexity of parish ministry from the perspective of a lay person in a leadership role. But I think to Susan's question, right? How do we make people of color feel welcome? And I don't think you have to change everything about yourself, everything about your spaces. Well, certain things, right? Make sure that we are represented somehow. But not everything has to be so drastic. It's as simple as listening before imposing anything, right? If I want to feel welcome, I want to be listened to. I want to feel that I'm not restricted to be myself. A lot of times there's this unspoken expectation in a lot of Episcopal churches where you have to behave, right? Quote unquote, behave. You have to sit. You can't do this. You can't do that. I feel like if we make our spaces less strict, I think a lot of people, especially people of color, where culturally we're more expressive and are, I enjoy living the service in a different way. And a lot of us are Episcopalians and in the Anglican tradition, and we enjoy the liturgy and everything. But we sometimes in certain spaces, we can't really be ourselves, right? So if spaces are created where we are let, people just let us be us, I think it's great. But here at the cathedral, one of the things that we make sure to do to welcome or to make sure that our Latinx community feels like this could be their home is using the culture, right? Mixing the culture with some of the parts of the liturgy of the Episcopal Church that are also very beautiful. The music is important for us, right? We make sure that's included and make sure that the Anglos, the whites in the community understand that you have to value that. That's how we see God. That is how we live our spirituality, our connection to God. It's not wrong. It's just different than what you're used to. So that truly valuing who we are by listening to us, by coming to our worships, living in community with us. I think that's a way where we can begin to see people of color feel more welcomed in our spaces. I did want to read some of the comments on our Facebook so that we engage with our folks. Sharon says, I can't help but think that maybe we shouldn't only focus on making people of color feel safe and welcome in our church, but we should take our church out to people of color to join them in their churches and communities, build relationship first, and then invite people home.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Right? What do we think about that? Any thoughts on that comment? I think Sharon is it's right on.
I can't wait to hear more from Sharon when it unfolds.
Yes. Michael says, I think we do a good job of the initial welcoming people of varying backgrounds, but we are less willing to make changes to make our church a forever home for our new sisters and brothers.
Yeah.
Can we discuss that reality?
Yeah, boy, one of our series a while back, one of our speakers said, I always feel like when I come to church that I'm welcome in the parlor, but don't dare try to get in the kitchen. And that to me is really one of our challenges. Now, anybody who's working in the kitchen, I know that's tough work, and those people have been in there a long time. You don't mess with the people in the kitchen. But the metaphor is what's important. Is, you know, are people welcome to a certain point, but are they able to deepen in relationship and in leadership in the community? Listen, I was just up in Trinity Mount Pocono. I am going to lift them up for a while, because that place, when I walked in the door, showed me what it's like for all folk to be welcome. I mean, I just felt it from the moment. And then I saw that there was diversity in the entire leadership body. So it was a sense that they'd been doing this hard work of building relationship for a while. And there were fruits of it. So, I mean, this is an example of a congregation. I would say we probably got folks, I think they were our highest represented congregation at our last gathering. They're probably folk from that congregation here today. It's because they are working really hard at every turn to welcome, to integrate, and to build relationships with people. And that's what's transforming.
I think the forever home thing is a great phrase that I don't know how people consider that in their churches. I don't know that I've heard that much, but thinking about it makes me hope that one of the hardest things about any community, any family, any church, any whatever, is sort of honoring what's come before us and lifting up the things that are actually sort of redemptive about that, while also embracing the fact that God's always calling us to something new. And if that new thing means that our concept of welcome and neighbor and love has to change a little bit, like, yeah, that's going to be a little tricky, but it's also work that I think is essential for the kind of questions that our friends are asking here in terms of, you know, can we move on without that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I maybe kicking and screaming, but God has a way of doing that too and bringing us along.
Yeah. And I mean, homes have issues, right? Homes are never going to be perfect. And that's what makes us even more interesting, right? That space where we allowed ourselves to work through those challenges in that forever home. I think that's what we're essentially being called to do is to work through those roadblocks. And how do we actually show our faith in a way that it's actually genuine and that it's good? Well, right. You know, what I'm trying to say, in a way that well, those roadblocks and those challenges, I think at least gives us a little bit of I'll say energy, as I stated earlier, because if we stay in the same tone, same playing field or whatever, we're never going to be excited about what comes next, right? We're never going to be excited about, like in a home, when a new birth happens, right? What are those new births in our home, in that forever home? I think that's the excitement about the challenges in building home for everyone, not just the people that look like us, but for everyone.
Amen.
I don't know if that made sense at all, but
of course it did.
Yeah. Another comment from Melissa. She says, I never meet new people by staying in my own house. I also never invite them in without first making sure that my house is in order.
Oh. Get your house in order. Yeah. That means deep cleaning. I mean, that's that stuff that I, stuff away, don't want to touch. Yeah, isn't that our soul work? Yeah, really going deep. Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about deep cleaning. I something I despise. Ask Megan. But I also thought a different direction there too, because I agree. Like we want to present our best selves, but I think we also want to present our authentic selves too. And that doesn't mean, we we don't do any cleaning, but I like when our churches don't look like surgery rooms. I like when they're not, entirely sterile and sort of, I want the walls to be scuffed up a little bit. I want to make it look like people actually live here and enjoy this, and that things are happening and activity is there. And I don't know. I'm sure we could have an authentic experience in something a little cleaner than that. But I embrace the other side of that as well, I think.
Yeah. Or that bench that it's not leveled, right? There's always that one at the church. I think it's fun to find those little cracks, right? What is cracking open? I mean, I think that's exactly it in our churches. We'd love to see those cracks because, like you said, Dennis, it shows that there is something alive in our spaces, that we're not just always trying to patch up the things that don't look cute so that people only see what we want them to see. I think it's important for people to see everything. I mean, we don't want to be slobs, right? We don't want to, right. But we want to make sure that, like you said, we present our authentic selves. And sometimes that's there are cracks there.
I do love the idea of being prepared for guests. I mean, that's a wonderfully biblical image of and an Advent one, right? Like, sort of be prepared, be ready. Like your neighbor is coming, or you can go to your neighbor, but either way, I do think there needs to be some preparation as well. It can't all be super messy, I guess.
So I think one last question for us. Stephanie said, I think in the last part of her video to the Diocese of Bethlehem, that the Diocese of Bethlehem can be the light that shines in the darkness, that guides folks into whatever this journey is here for us. So what does that mean for us? I think one of the questions we ask people in the groups is, what does this all mean for us looking forward? What does this conversation, what did this relationship buildings, what does it mean for us here in the Diocese of Bethlehem?
And Sandy, I think you've crystallized what it is we're trying to do with our assembly work that Dennis is leading in the diocese. Because what Stephanie said was, Bethlehem can shine brightly. I think she said, if you walk without fear. Walk without fear. And so I think for me, the flip side of fear is truth telling. We've got to be able to just articulate the realities of our situation. It goes back to the reckoning question, but we got to say, this is like it is. Don't try to gloss it over. It's just, this is kind of like it is. And this is where our passions are. This is where our hopes are. This is where there's energy in our community. And if we can get congregations joined together, leadership joined together, where we start talking about how we partner and how there is passion in certain areas in our communities, I think that's when we will be shining brightly like never before. It's when we really hunker down. And boy, this is hunker down time, right? But it's calling us to do the opposite of that, maybe even virtually. It's calling us to be truth tellers, to walk without fear, and to say, listen, it's not all about the buildings. It's not all about the roof, but it's actually all about the community and the people and building the beloved community in our midst. And that's where I think our light will shine.
Yeah.
Sandy, the bishop and I had 2 minutes to talk about this during that session, and we both agreed that Bethlehem at Christmas time is a special place, and it just has this feeling to it. And I think Stephanie at other times used the word enchanted, or like that there's something to that, and that's something I don't ever want us to forget as an image for, I think, maybe not just this time and this place, but as a people, that's something that happens to us collectively as the body of Christ, as people who love one another and are called to be together. And as Paul would tell us and remind us that we all have to do it together, and none of us can say that the others aren't good enough or anything like that. And so, I think this moment of the only way forward is to be truth tellers, right? But also to say that we have so much going for us in that idea of being enchanted, and then going out into the world and doing it there too, and telling the story that we know to be true and life-giving, and proclaim it, everywhere in that town and everywhere in this diocese. And is that going to fix every concern that we have overnight? No, definitely not. But I think it gives us a place to sort of remember who we are and where we've come from, and where, with God's help, we can go together.
Amen. Amen to that. I love that. I agree with both of you. I think we're at a good place as a diocese. I think something good is coming. I think good things are happening across the diocese. And this is a great example of that. And we just got to do it together. Like you've both said, we just got to continue to walk together. And like the bishop always says, you have everything you need. You've been prepared for this moment. And God has prepared this diocese for this moment, for all of us to be in community and to continue to love each other and proclaim the gospel of love and hope and reconciliation and justice. Thank you both for, thank you to the three of us. The three of us for this awesome conversation. I just want to say thank you all for being with us on Facebook. I have included the link to our Facebook page where you can find both of the videos from our session. Our next session will be January 14th, right, Dennis?
13th?
13th.
Second week of January.
The second week of January. You can't miss it. 13th. Thursday, 13th at 7, our second stage session for our Common Life series. You can't miss that. It's going to be a great session with a wonderful guest speaker right here. So we hope that you all can join us. If you need more information on how to register, go on our website, Episcopal, diobeth.org. diobeth.org. You can find more information there for this series. Bishop, can you say us a short blessing for us tonight?
Yeah, and if you'll trust me in this, if everybody will trust me in this, I want to close with a really tough prayer. It's from W.E. Du Bois, E.B. Du Bois. He gets, I think, at the heart of indicting God and indicting a racist society. So if you'll stay with me, it's hard, but stay with it, because it is hopeful. All right, let us pray. Bewildered we are, and passion tossed, made with the madness of a mobbed and mocked and murdered people. Straining at the armposts of thy throne, we raise our shackled hands and charge thee, God, by the bones of our stolen fathers and by the tears of our dead mothers, by the very blood of thy crucified Christ. What meaneth this? Tell us the plan. Give us the sign. Keep not thou silent, O God. Sit no longer blind, Lord God, deaf to our prayer and dumb to our dumb suffering. Surely thou too art not white, O Lord, O pale, bloodless, heartless thing. God can take it. Whatever our prayer, whatever our lament, we bring it to God, trusting in that love. And may Almighty God bless us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Wow.
Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Take care. See you soon.